The facility sits on high desert land in southern Colorado, far from cities and far from public view. Its name is ADX Florence, officially the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility. It represents the most restrictive form of incarceration used by the federal government. The prison exists to isolate people the system considers impossible to manage anywhere else. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing, because understanding how this system works depends on sustained attention, not assumptions. ADX Florence operates as a control institution. It is not designed around rehabilitation. It is designed around permanent containment. The prison holds individuals convicted of terrorism, organized crime leadership, serial murder, espionage, and extreme acts of violence within other prisons. Many inmates arrive here after killing staff or other prisoners elsewhere. The location is deliberate. Fremont County is remote. The surrounding landscape is dry, flat, and quiet. The isolation begins before anyone enters the gate. There are no surrounding neighborhoods. There are no visible communities nearby. The prison stands apart from ordinary life by design. ADX Florence opens in 1994 after a series of violent incidents at federal prisons across the United States. The most significant catalyst is the 1983 murder of 2 federal correctional officers at USP Marion in Illinois. In response, the Bureau of Prisons moves toward a model of long-term isolation as a management tool. ADX Florence becomes the final result of that shift. The architecture reflects the mission. The prison is constructed almost entirely from reinforced concrete. The walls are thick. The corridors are narrow. Sound does not travel easily. Windows are minimal. Every structural decision reduces contact, communication, and unpredictability. Inmates live in single-person cells measuring roughly 7 by 12 feet. Each cell contains a concrete bed, a small desk, a sink with cold water only, and a toilet. Furniture is fixed to the floor. There are no movable objects. The door is solid steel with a narrow window. Human contact is restricted to brief interactions with staff. Most inmates spend 22 to 23 hours per day alone. Meals arrive through slots in the door. Recreation occurs in individual enclosures. Some recreation spaces are outdoors but enclosed by concrete walls that block views of the horizon. The sky is often the only visible natural feature. Communication between inmates is intentionally limited. Cells are positioned to prevent direct sight lines. Voices do not carry well through the structure. Even knocking on walls is discouraged and monitored. The prison's layout reduces the possibility of coordinated activity. Movement within the facility is tightly controlled. When inmates leave their cells, they are typically restrained. Staff use handcuffs, leg irons, and escort protocols. Transfers occur on strict schedules. Surveillance cameras cover nearly every area. Human presence is constant, but interaction is minimal. ADX Florence houses individuals convicted in federal court. It does not accept state prisoners. Placement decisions come from the Bureau of Prisons based on security assessments. In theory, inmates can earn transfer to less restrictive facilities through sustained compliance. In practice, progression is slow and uncertain. The prison operates on a step-down program. New arrivals enter the most restrictive housing units. Over time, some inmates may move to slightly less isolating conditions. Even at the highest step-down levels, confinement remains extreme compared to other federal prisons. The most restrictive units limit all social contact. Inmates eat alone. They exercise alone. Educational and vocational programs are minimal or non-existent. Reading material is limited. Television access is restricted. Radios are often allowed but tightly controlled. The system relies on predictability. Days follow identical patterns. Lights turn on and off at fixed times. Meals arrive at scheduled intervals. Recreation occurs at assigned hours. The routine reduces unpredictability but also removes variation. ADX Florence is often described as silent. The silence is not absolute. Doors open and close. Footsteps echo in corridors. Intercoms activate. But human conversation is rare. The absence of normal social sound is a defining feature. The Bureau of Prisons describes ADX Florence as necessary for safety. Officials argue that some individuals pose ongoing threats regardless of environment. The prison's purpose is to neutralize those threats permanently. From the institutional perspective, isolation is a tool of prevention. Critics argue that prolonged solitary confinement causes psychological harm. Medical experts and human rights organizations have raised concerns about sensory deprivation and mental deterioration. Lawsuits have challenged conditions at ADX Florence, particularly regarding inmates with pre-existing mental illness. Federal courts have reviewed these claims over decades. Some cases result in policy adjustments. Others uphold the Bureau of Prisons' authority. The legal framework allows long-term isolation under federal standards, provided basic needs are met. Mental health services exist within the facility. Psychologists conduct evaluations. Treatment is available, but delivery occurs under restrictive conditions. Therapy often takes place through cell doors or secure barriers. Group therapy does not exist. Some inmates at ADX Florence have diagnosed mental illnesses. Others develop symptoms after prolonged isolation. Reported effects include anxiety, depression, difficulty concentrating, and altered perception. Establishing direct causation remains complex and contested. The prison's defenders point to the backgrounds of those housed there. Many inmates have histories of orchestrating violence even while incarcerated. Some directed criminal networks from inside other prisons. ADX Florence eliminates that capacity. The prison also houses individuals convicted of high-profile terrorist attacks. Several perpetrators of international and domestic terrorism serve sentences there. The isolation prevents communication with external networks and media. Contact with the outside world is limited but not eliminated. Inmates may receive monitored mail. Visits are rare and conducted through thick glass with no physical contact. Phone calls are restricted and recorded. Legal access remains protected under federal law. Staff working at ADX Florence undergo specialized training. The environment demands strict adherence to protocol. The job involves minimal conversation with inmates and constant attention to procedure. The psychological toll on staff is also a subject of discussion. Security failures inside ADX Florence are rare. Violence between inmates is almost non-existent due to isolation. Assaults on staff are uncommon. From a security standpoint, the prison achieves its stated goal. The absence of violence inside the facility contrasts with its reputation. ADX Florence is not known for riots or bloodshed. Its notoriety comes from what does not happen. There is no congregation. There is no collective resistance. There is only containment. The facility's design reflects a philosophy of incapacitation. It assumes certain individuals cannot be rehabilitated or safely managed through social interaction. The system prioritizes control over transformation. International observers have compared ADX Florence to other Supermax prisons worldwide. The United Nations has criticized prolonged solitary confinement as a potential form of cruel treatment. U.S. officials maintain that federal standards differ and comply with domestic law. The debate centers on duration. Short-term isolation is widely used across prison systems. ADX Florence imposes isolation for years or decades. Some inmates spend their entire sentences there. Transfer out of ADX Florence is possible but rare. Decisions depend on long-term behavior assessments. Even inmates who comply fully may remain due to the nature of their convictions. Risk assessments weigh heavily against release to less restrictive settings. The prison does not operate in secrecy, but access is limited. Media tours are rare and tightly controlled. Public understanding comes primarily from court documents, government reports, and former inmates' accounts. Those accounts vary. Some describe the environment as unbearable. Others describe adaptation through routine. The common element is monotony. Time passes slowly. Days blend together. Change is minimal. Education programs exist in limited form. Some inmates pursue correspondence courses. Access to materials is controlled. Internet access does not exist. Libraries are restricted. Medical care is provided on-site. Serious cases transfer to federal medical centers. Basic healthcare occurs within the facility. Appointments follow security protocols that limit movement and contact. The cost of operating ADX Florence is significantly higher than standard prisons. Staffing ratios are higher. Infrastructure maintenance is expensive. The federal government accepts these costs as necessary for security. ADX Florence symbolizes the outer boundary of incarceration in the United States. It represents what happens when the system abandons social management entirely. It is the endpoint of punitive escalation. Supporters argue that without ADX Florence, the federal system would face unacceptable risks. Critics argue that no system should rely on extreme isolation as a permanent solution. Public opinion remains divided. Many Americans support harsh measures for individuals convicted of extreme crimes. Others question the moral and psychological consequences of long-term isolation. The prison operates under federal oversight. Policies evolve slowly. Changes often result from litigation rather than proactive reform. The fundamental structure remains unchanged since the 1990s. ADX Florence is not intended as a deterrent. Most inmates arrive long after their crimes. Its purpose is not to send a message but to manage a problem. The problem is defined as uncontrollable human behavior. The facility's existence raises questions about the limits of punishment. At what point does isolation cease to serve a practical function? Where is the boundary between security and harm? These questions remain unresolved. ADX Florence continues to operate. Inmates continue to arrive. The system maintains that no alternative exists for certain cases. The silence inside the prison persists. Days follow schedules. Doors open and close. Staff monitor screens. Inmates remain alone. From the outside, ADX Florence appears static. Inside, time moves slowly. The institution does exactly what it is designed to do. It contains, isolates, and neutralizes. Whether this approach represents necessity or failure depends on perspective. The prison stands as a physical manifestation of the federal government's most extreme response to perceived danger. There is no rehabilitation narrative here. There are no redemption programs. There is only management. ADX Florence remains operational today. Its role within the federal system is unchanged. It houses those deemed permanently dangerous. The debate around its use continues in courts, academic studies, and public discourse. No consensus emerges. The prison endures. This facility does not ask whether people can change. It assumes they cannot. That assumption defines everything inside its walls. ADX Florence exists for one reason: to permanently neutralize human threats the system believes cannot be controlled any other way. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.